The glass shattered before anyone understood why. Ji-hoon Kang's hand was still in the air when the sound hit. Porcelain against marble, 100 shards catching the fluorescent light like tiny knives. The lobby of Kang Tower went silent. 40 employees. Frozen. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. And in that silence, a small voice cut through the air like a blade. "You need to apologize to my mum." Every head turned. Standing there, barely up to his waist, backpack still strapped to her shoulders, chin lifted like she owned the building, was a 7-year-old girl. Brown eyes blazing, fists clenched at her sides, staring straight up at the most feared man in South Korea like he was nothing more than a naughty boy who'd broken a rule. Nobody interrupted Ji-hoon Kang. Not board members, not investors, not even his own father when he was alive. But this child did. And before you find out what happened next, before you see this billionaire's carefully built empire start to crack because of one little girl's 4 simple words, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to take you somewhere you will not see coming. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from tonight, and smash that like button if you love a good comeback story. Now, let's go back 2 hours to where all of this began. 2 hours earlier, Grace Johnson had woken up that morning at 4:45 a.m., same as every morning for the past 3 years. She'd made Amara's lunch first, rice, grilled fish, the little seaweed snacks her daughter loved, packed neatly in a lunchbox with a small folded napkin that said "Mummy loves you" in her careful handwriting. Every single day, rain or shine, good days or terrible ones. Grace worked as head staff for the Kang family's private executive company connected to Kang Tower by a private elevator only staff and family used. She'd held the position for 2 years. She was good at it, meticulous, quiet, invisible in the way the best staff learn to be. She kept Ji-hoon Kang's schedule of preferences memorized. His coffee, black, no sugar, served at exactly 7 a.m. His documents, organized by color-coded folder. His silence, respected without question. She had never once been late, never once made a mistake that mattered. Until today. Ms. Johnson. The voice belonged to Yoon-hee, the executive assistant who oversaw household staff, a woman with a smile that never reached her eyes. Mr. Kang's board presentation files are missing. The ones for the Incheon merger. Grace felt her stomach drop. I filed those myself. Yesterday. In the blue folder, top drawer, left cabinet. They're not there. I checked before I left. Yoon-hee's expression didn't change. Well, they're not there now. Grace's hands had started to sweat. She knew, with the kind of certainty that lives in your bones, that she had filed those documents correctly. She remembered the weight of the folder in her hands. She remembered locking the cabinet. But knowing something and proving it are 2 very different things. I'll look again, Grace said, already moving toward the office. There's no time to look again, Yoon-hee said, and something in her voice made Grace stop cold. Mr. Kang is presenting to the board in 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Grace's mind raced. She thought about her daughter, waiting in the lobby after school like she always did on the days Grace's shift ran late. She thought about the rent due in 9 days. She thought about the visa paperwork sitting in her drawer at home, the one that depended entirely on steady employment. She thought about all of it in the space of about 4 seconds, and none of those thoughts helped her find a folder that had somehow vanished into thin air. She searched anyway, drawer by drawer, shelf by shelf, nothing. And that's when the elevator doors opened, and Ji-hoon Kang stepped out. He didn't walk into rooms. He arrived in them. Tall, precise, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Grace made in 4 months, his face carved from the same cold stone as every headline that had ever been written about him. Korea's coldest CEO, the Ice King of Kang Group. A man who has never apologized for anything. People said he hadn't smiled in public since his father's funeral 6 years ago. "Where are my files?" he said. Not a question, a statement, flat and sharp as a blade laid on a table. Grace's throat went dry. "Sir, I filed them correctly. Yesterday. I don't know what. I don't care what you don't know." His voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. It dropped 10 degrees in the room instead. "I care about the 11 board members currently sitting in that room waiting for numbers that are supposed to be in my hands right now. Mr. Kang, if you'll just give me a moment. I gave you a job," he said. "One job. Keep my documents organized. You couldn't manage that." Around them, 3 other staff members had stopped what they were doing, pretending very hard to be busy with anything else. Yoon-hee stood a few feet away, arms folded, watching with an expression Grace would only understand much later. An expression of quiet, satisfied victory. "You're done," Ji-hoon said. "Clear out your things. Today." "Sir, please. I have a daughter. I need this. That's not my concern." The words landed like a slap. Grace felt her whole body go still, the way it does right before you cry. That terrible frozen second where your body knows what's coming before your mind catches up. She didn't argue further. She didn't beg. She simply nodded once, turned, and walked toward the small staff room to collect the little she kept there. A cardigan, a photo of Amara taped inside her locker, a chipped mug. She held it together the entire elevator ride down. She held it together crossing the lobby. And then she saw her daughter sitting on the bench by the front doors, swinging her legs, waiting the way she always waited. Patient, sweet, trusting that her mother would come get her like she always did. And Grace Johnson's face finally broke. Amara saw it instantly. Kids always do. They read faces the way adults read headlines, fast and without mercy for subtlety. She slid off the bench before her mother even reached her. "Mummy?" "What's wrong?" Grace tried to smile. Tried to do that thing mothers do, where they fold their pain into something small enough to hide. "Nothing, baby. Let's just go home." But her voice cracked on the word home, and that was enough. Amara's eyes went wide, then narrowed, then locked onto something behind her mother's shoulder, because at that exact moment, the private elevator chimed open again, and Ji-hoon Kang stepped out, phone already pressed to his ear, already moving toward his car, already 3 thoughts ahead into the rest of his day like Grace Johnson had never existed at all. Something in Amara went very still, and then very loud. "Was that him?" she asked. "Is that the man who made you cry?" "Amara, sweetheart. It's complicated." But Amara was already moving. Small feet fast against marble, backpack bouncing. Grace's hand shot out to grab her and missed by inches, and by the time she turned around, her daughter was standing directly in Ji-hoon Kang's path, arms crossed, chin up, blocking a man who controlled a company worth $11 billion. "Amara, no!" Grace's voice came out strangled. Ji-hoon stopped walking, not because he wanted to, because there was, quite literally, a child standing in front of him refusing to move, and even his security detail seemed too stunned to intervene, glancing at each other like nobody had rehearsed this scenario. He looked down at her, the way you'd look at an unexpected weather event, confused, slightly annoyed, entirely unprepared. "Move, please," he said. "No." A flicker of something crossed his face, disbelief mostly. Nobody said no to him. Not board members, not journalists, not his own mother most days. "I said move." "You made my mummy cry," Amara said, louder now, her voice bouncing off the marble walls, off the glass, off every camera phone that had quietly, subtly begun to rise into the air around them. She never did anything wrong. She works so hard. She wakes up at 5 in the morning to make my lunch, and she comes home so tired her feet hurt. And she never complains. Not once. And you made her cry in 1 minute. Amara. Grace was beside her now, mortified, trying to pull her back gently. Baby, please, we need to go. But Amara shook her head, planted her feet, and looked straight up into the eyes of the most powerful man in the building. You need to apologize to my mum. The lobby had gone fully silent, every employee frozen mid-motion. Security guards exchanging glances, unsure whether the correct protocol here involved removing a crying child from the CEO's path, or simply standing very, very still, and hoping this wasn't their problem. Ji-hoon stared down at her. For 3 full seconds, he said nothing. His mouth opened slightly, then closed. It was the kind of pause that, later, 3 different employees would describe in 3 completely different ways. He looked furious, one would say. He looked like he'd seen a ghost, another would insist. The truth, though the cameras couldn't capture it, was quieter than either version. He looked like a man who had been asked a question nobody had asked him in a very long time, and didn't have a rehearsed answer ready. Your mother, he said slowly, made an error that cost this company. She didn't make a mistake. Amara's voice cracked, but she didn't back down. She's the best mummy in the whole world, and you don't even know her, and you fired her without even checking, and that's not fair. And grown-ups are supposed to say sorry when they're wrong. My mummy taught me that. So why don't you know it? Somewhere behind them, someone's phone camera caught the exact moment Ji-hoon Kang's expression cracked. Not into anger, not into the cold fury everyone expected, but into something raw and unreadable. Something that looked, if you looked closely enough, almost like shame. Amara, that's enough, Grace whispered, pulling her daughter back now with both hands, bowing slightly toward Ji-hoon out of pure instinct, the reflex of someone who had spent years learning to make herself smaller in rooms like this. I'm so sorry, sir. She's just a child. She doesn't understand. She understands perfectly, Ji-hoon said. The words came out quiet, almost involuntary, like they'd escaped before he could. Stop them! Grace blinked up at him, uncertain she'd heard correctly. He wasn't looking at her, though. He was still looking at Amara, who was still glaring up at him with tear-streaked cheeks and absolutely zero intention of backing down. And for one strange, suspended moment, the 2 of them just stared at each other, the billionaire and the 7-year-old, like 2 people speaking a language no one else in the lobby could hear. Then his phone buzzed in his hand, a text from his assistant. Board is asking where you are. This isn't a good look. He glanced at it, then back at Amara, then, for the briefest second, at Grace. He said nothing else. He turned, walked past them, and disappeared through the front doors into a waiting car, leaving nothing behind but silence, 30 stunned witnesses, and 1 video, filmed on a shaking phone by a junior analyst named Soo-jin, that would be uploaded to social media exactly 14 minutes later. By the time Grace and Amara reached their small apartment on the other side of the city, the video already had 40,000 views. By midnight, it had 4 million. By morning, the headline read, "Apologize to my mum." 7-year-old shames Korea's coldest CEO in public. And he had no answer. Grace didn't see any of it. She was too busy sitting on the edge of Amara's bed, stroking her daughter's hair as she finally cried herself to sleep, whispering the only thing she knew to be true in that moment. It's okay, baby. We'll be okay. She didn't believe it yet, but she needed Amara to. 12 floors above the city. In an office with floor-to-ceiling windows and not a single photograph on the walls, Ji-hoon Kang sat alone at his desk long after everyone else had gone home, watching the same 14-second clip on a loop. Over and over. The girl's voice. Her small, furious, fearless face. "You need to apologize to my mum." He had built an empire on never once saying those words to anyone. He wasn't sure, sitting there in the dark, why they were the only words he could hear. The video kept climbing. By 9 the next morning, it had 11 million views. News outlets picked it up before breakfast. Not the financial press this time, but entertainment desks, morning talk shows, the kind of coverage Ji-hoon Kang had spent his entire career avoiding. Reporters camped outside Kang Tower with cameras and microphones, all asking some version of the same question. Who is the woman in the video? Will Mr. Kang be issuing a statement? Inside the building, the mood was closer to panic. "This is a disaster," said Han Min-seok, Kang Group's head of communications, pacing in front of Ji-hoon's desk with his tablet clutched to his chest like a shield. 11 million views, sir. 11. And it's still climbing. People are calling you—" He winced, scrolling. "The man who made a child cry. There's already a trending hashtag. Do you understand what this does to the merger talks? To investor confidence?" Ji-hoon didn't look up from the window. "Where is she?" Min-seok blinked. "Sir? Grace Johnson. Where does she live?" That's not really the priority right now. We need to draft a statement. Something that shows accountability without admitting fault. Legal has some language they want you to—" "Where does she live?" Ji-hoon said again. And this time, the room went quiet, because everyone in it had learned over the years exactly what that particular tone meant. It meant the conversation was over whether anyone else agreed with it or not. Min-seok exhaled. "I'll have HR pull the address." "No?" Ji-hoon finally turned from the window. "Pull the security footage, all of it, from yesterday morning. The office, the residence, the cabinets, everything." The footage? Sir, with respect, the story isn't about the missing folder anymore. It's about whether I fired an innocent woman," Ji-hoon said, and something in his voice made even Min-seok stop talking. "Get me the footage." It took 40 minutes. Ji-hoon watched it alone, in silence, his jaw tightening frame by frame. The grainy black and white recording showed Grace Johnson filing the blue folder exactly where she said she had. Top drawer, left cabinet, locked at 6:47 p.m. It showed her leaving at 7:02. And then, at 7:15 p.m., it showed Yoon-hee entering the office alone, unlocking the cabinet with a spare key, removing the folder, and walking out with it tucked under her arm. Ji-hoon watched it 3 times. He wasn't a man who reacted visibly to most things. Betrayal, deception, corporate sabotage. He'd seen all of it before. Dozens of times, from dozens of people who thought they were smarter than the cameras. But something about this particular betrayal sat differently in his chest. Not because it had cost him a merger deadline. Because it had cost an innocent woman her job, her dignity, and, he realized, watching the footage again, very possibly a child's ability to trust that grown-ups tell the truth. He picked up his phone. "Bring me Yoon-hee," he said. "Now." She arrived 11 minutes later, smoothing her blazer, wearing the same composed smile she always wore, the one that had fooled him for 2 years. It didn't survive past the first 30 seconds. "I have the footage," Ji-hoon said, sliding his tablet across the desk. He didn't raise his voice. He never did. It was, people often said, the most frightening thing about him. You took the folder yourself. You let an innocent woman take the blame. Why? Yoon-hee's composure cracked slightly, but she recovered fast. "Sir, I can explain, then explain. She was getting too close to the family." To you. The staff were talking. I thought—" She stopped herself, realizing too late how it sounded. "You thought sabotaging her career would fix that," Ji-hoon said flatly. "You thought destroying a single mother's livelihood, in front of her own child, was an acceptable business strategy." "Sir, I only meant—" "You're finished here," he said. "Security will escort you out. Don't contact this company, this family, or Grace Johnson again. If you do, I will make sure every hospitality group in this country knows exactly why you were terminated." Yoon-hee opened her mouth, thought better of it, and left without another word. Ji-hoon sat alone again after that, the office quiet except for the hum of the city outside his window. He thought about the footage. He thought about the folder. He thought, more than either of those things, about a 7-year-old girl standing in his lobby with tear-streaked cheeks, refusing to move, telling him with more courage than his entire board possessed that he owed someone an apology. He picked up his coat. "Sir?" Min Seok looked up as he passed. "Where are you?" "I need an address," Ji-hoon said. "Get it from HR archives if you have to. I'm going to go say something I should have said yesterday." Grace's apartment was on the 4th floor of a modest building 20 minutes from the tower, the kind of place with a narrow stairwell and paint peeling gently near the ceiling corners. Ji-hoon stood outside the door for almost a full minute before knocking, which was, if anyone had been watching, deeply out of character for a man who had never once hesitated before entering a room in his life. Grace opened the door in an old cardigan, eyes red-rimmed from a sleepless night, and the moment she saw who was standing there, her face shifted through about 4 emotions in half a second. Shock, fear, confusion, and something that looked dangerously close to anger. "What are you doing here?" she said. It wasn't a question. "I came to apologize," Ji-hoon said. "Properly, not for the cameras." Behind Grace, a small voice piped up from the hallway. "Mummy, who is it?" Amara appeared in the doorway in pyjamas covered in tiny stars, hair messy from sleep, and the second she saw him, her whole body went rigid, fists curling at her sides all over again like she was ready to go another round. "You," she said. "Me," Ji-hoon said quietly. Grace put a protective hand on her daughter's shoulder, but Amara didn't move, didn't back down, just stood there staring up at him with the same fearless fire from the lobby. "Did you come to say sorry?" she asked. "For real this time? Or is this just because everyone's mad at you on the internet?" Ji-hoon crouched down, actually crouched, knees bending, bringing himself to her eye level, something none of his employees had seen him do for anyone in 6 years, and looked at her directly. "Both," he admitted. "The internet is very mad at me, but that's not why I came." He paused. "I came because you were right. Your mother did nothing wrong. Someone else caused the mistake, and I punished her for it without checking first. That was wrong of me. I'm sorry. To both of you." Amara studied him for a long moment, the way children do when they're deciding whether an adult is telling the truth or just performing one. "Say it to my mummy's face," she said, "not mine." Ji-hoon almost smiled. Almost. He stood, turned to Grace, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, said the words slowly, deliberately, meaning every syllable. "I'm sorry, Ms. Johnson. Your position is reinstated, effective immediately, with full back pay, and a formal apology issued to the rest of the staff. The person responsible has been terminated, and if you never want to see me again after today, I will understand completely." Grace stared at him, arms crossed, jaw tight, clearly still deciding whether 2 years of careful invisibility and 1 devastating day could be undone by a single doorstep apology. "We'll see," she said finally. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was, Ji-hoon realized as he walked back down the narrow stairwell into the cold evening air, the first door that had ever actually been left open for him. "She'll see." 2 words that shouldn't have meant anything, and yet Ji-hoon Kang found himself replaying them the entire drive back to the tower, turning them over like a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. He was not a man used to uncertainty. Numbers were certain. Contracts were certain. Even hostility, in his line of work, was a language he understood fluently. But we'll see, spoken quietly, without malice, by a woman standing in a doorway with her daughter's hand on her hip. That was a language he'd never had to learn. If you're enjoying this one, don't forget to like this video and drop a comment below. I want to know if you think Grace should forgive him. Now, back to the story. Grace didn't call the next day, or the day after that. She went back to work on the 3rd day, mostly because rent doesn't wait for pride to heal, and partly because Amara had asked her, very seriously over breakfast, whether they were going to be poor now, and Grace had realised that some battles matter less than a roof over your daughter's head. She expected awkwardness. She expected whispers. What she got instead was an office full of staff who suddenly treated her like something between a celebrity and a war hero. The woman whose daughter had stood up to Ji-hoon Kang and lived to tell about it. Co-workers she'd barely spoken to in 2 years now greeted her by name. Someone had left a small potted plant on her desk with a sticky note that read, "You're a legend." Yoon-hee's old office sat empty, door closed, like a wound the building hadn't finished healing. Ji-hoon didn't approach her that first day, or the second. He watched from a distance instead, through his office window when she crossed the courtyard, through the glass of the executive kitchen when she came to refill the coffee station at exactly 7 a.m., like clockwork, like nothing had ever happened. He told himself he was simply monitoring the situation, making sure the transition back was smooth. He was, after all, a man who valued due diligence. He did not examine too closely why due diligence required him to know what time she took her lunch break. It was Amara, in the end, who broke the standoff. Because children, as it turns out, have no patience for the slow, careful dance adults insist on performing around their own feelings. She showed up in the lobby again on a Thursday afternoon. Same bench, same backpack, waiting for her mother's shift to end. And when the private elevator opened and Ji-hoon stepped out, phone in hand, deep in a call with an investor about the Incheon merger, she simply walked over, tugged his sleeve mid-sentence, and said, "You still haven't come to say sorry to my mum's face without leaving right after." Ji-hoon actually stopped talking mid-call. "I'll call you back," he told the investor, and hung up. He looked down at her. "I did apologise. You said sorry and then you left really fast. That's not a real apology. My mum says a real apology means you stick around and let the person be mad at you for a bit if they need to." Ji-hoon considered this with the same gravity he gave board proposals. That's surprisingly accurate advice. "I know. My mum's smart." Amara crossed her arms, studying him. "Are you scared of her?" "No," he said too quickly. "You're scared of her," Amara said, delighted, and for the first time in the entire story, something that might generously be called a smile tugged at the corner of Ji-hoon Kang's mouth. "I am not scared of your mother." "Then come to dinner. Tonight. We're having kimchi jjigae. Mum makes the best kimchi jjigae in Seoul. Probably in the whole world, but don't tell her I said probably because she'll say it's definitely." "I don't think that's—" "She won't say no, if you're already standing at the door," Amara said, with the terrifying logic of a 7-year-old who had clearly thought this through. "She's too polite. It's a good plan." Grace, as it turned out, was significantly less polite than her daughter had promised, standing in the doorway of their small apartment 40 minutes later, with her arms folded, and an expression that suggested she was recalculating several life choices in real time, chief among them, how much freedom to give a daughter with zero concept of boundaries. "Amara Johnson," she said slowly. Please tell me you did not invite the CEO of Kang Group to our house for dinner. He said he wasn't scared of you, Amara said, entirely unbothered. So I figured he should. Prove it. Ji-hoon, standing awkwardly in the hallway holding a bottle of wine he'd panic bought from a corner store because arriving empty-handed, had felt, suddenly, unthinkable, cleared his throat. I can leave, if this is unwelcome. Grace stared at him for a long moment, then at her daughter, who was already dragging a third chair to the small kitchen table with the confidence of someone who had never once in her life doubted that her plans would work out, then back at him. You're allergic to anything? Grace asked finally. No. Good. Sit down before it gets cold. And take your shoes off. This isn't the boardroom. Dinner started tense and ended somewhere Ji-hoon Kang did not entirely recognize. He hadn't sat at a family dinner table in years, not since before the merger that made him CEO, not since before his father died and left him an empire instead of a childhood. He'd forgotten, somewhere along the way, that people laughed at dinner. That conversation didn't need an agenda, that Amara narrated her entire school day in exhaustive detail, including a lengthy subplot involving a classmate named Ji-woo who had, apparently, committed several unforgivable crimes against the class hamster. He didn't feed it for 3 whole days, Amara said, outraged, gesturing with her spoon. 3 days. I had to tell the teacher. That was very responsible of you, Ji-hoon said, and meant it. I know, Amara nodded solemnly. I'm basically the hamster's bodyguard now. Grace snorted into her water glass, trying and failing to disguise it as a cough, and Ji-hoon glanced at her, really looked at her, maybe for the first time since the lobby, and found himself staring a beat too long at the way laughter changed her whole face, softened something in it that the last 2 years of careful professional distance had never let him see. She caught him looking. He didn't look away fast enough. What? She said, not unkindly, one eyebrow raised. Nothing, Ji-hoon said. The stew is excellent. It's kimchi jjigae. Amara wasn't exaggerating. I wouldn't dare accuse her of exaggeration. She seems like someone who deals strictly in verified facts. I do, Amara confirmed, mouth full of rice. By the end of the night, something had shifted, not dramatically, not with declarations or music swelling in the background, but quietly, the way trust actually builds in real life. One dinner, one laugh, one small kindness at a time. Ji-hoon stood at the door afterward, coat back on, and found himself unwilling to leave in the same abrupt way he'd left the first time. Thank you, he said. For dinner, for the chance. Grace studied him, arms crossed again, though the edge in it had softened considerably since that first doorstep conversation. Don't make me regret it. I won't. You said sorry properly this time, Amara announced from behind her mother, arms crossed in a perfect imitation of Grace's stance. You stayed for the whole dinner and everything. I'm putting that in my report. Your report? To myself. I'm keeping track. Ji-hoon looked between the two of them, the fierce, unshakable little girl who had brought an empire's most feared man to his knees in a marble lobby, and her mother, watching him now with something that wasn't quite trust yet, but wasn't quite suspicion anymore either. I look forward to seeing how it turns out, he said. He walked down 4 flights of stairs into the cold night air, and for the first time since Seoul had turned that 14-second video into a headline, Ji-hoon Kang found himself smiling. Really smiling. The kind his employees would not have recognized, the kind that had nothing to do with mergers or acquisitions and everything to do with a kitchen table, a bowl of stew, and a 7-year-old keeping score. 3 weeks passed, and Seoul, as cities do, mostly moved on to the next headline. But inside Kang Tower, something had quietly, permanently changed. Ji-hoon started leaving his office earlier. Not much, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, but enough that his assistant began scheduling his calendar around a mysterious block labelled simply personal, which nobody dared question after the second time someone tried and got a look cold enough to end careers. He started remembering things he had no reason to remember. That Amara hated mushrooms. That Grace took her coffee the exact opposite way he did. Sweet with too much milk. That Thursdays were library day at Amara's school. And she liked to be picked up exactly on time because being late made her feel forgotten. He was not, by any calculation his board would recognise, behaving like a man managing a PR crisis anymore. He was behaving like a man who had somewhere to be. If you're still with me, you already know where this is going, but stick around, because it's not going to be that easy. Comment below if you've ever had a rough week turn into the best thing that happened to you. And let's finish this story. The trouble came, as trouble often does, from the last place anyone had bothered to secure. Yoon-hee hadn't disappeared quietly. She'd spent 3 weeks feeding a version of events to a tabloid reporter, one that painted Ji-hoon not as a man learning humility, but as a billionaire, grooming a vulnerable employee for personal gain, using words like inappropriate and exploitation stitched together from half-truths and out-of-context photos of him at their apartment door. It ran online on a Friday morning with a headline designed to spread fast and hurt deep. CEO's redemption. Was never about justice. Sources reveal the real reason. He wanted the housekeeper back. Grace saw it on her phone during her lunch break, and the bottom of her stomach fell out. She called him before she'd even finished reading it, hands shaking, voice sharp with a fear she hadn't let herself feel since the day she got fired. Is this true? Any part of it? Because if this is some kind of... If you used my daughter to fix your image and now it's turning into... None of it is true, Ji-hoon said. And for once his controlled corporate calm cracked wide open, urgency bleeding into every word. Grace, listen to me. I'm coming to you right now. Don't, she said. Don't come here with cameras following you. Don't make this worse. My daughter doesn't need... Then meet me somewhere quiet. Please. She hesitated. But underneath the fear, underneath 3 weeks of careful, guarded trust, was the simple fact that every version of this man she'd actually witnessed, crouched down to her daughter's eye level, sitting awkwardly at her kitchen table laughing at a hamster story, hadn't matched a single word in that article. They met that evening at the small park 2 blocks from her apartment. Amara safely at a friend's house for a sleepover, the 2 of them alone on a bench under streetlights that buzzed faintly overhead. I'm suing them, Ji-hoon said before she could speak. The paper and Yoon-hee personally for defamation. My legal team already has the footage. Texts she sent the reporter, timestamps, everything. It'll be retracted within 48 hours publicly, with a correction on the front page. That's not what I'm worried about, Grace said quietly. Then what? She looked at him, really looked, the streetlight catching the exhaustion and something raw underneath it. I'm worried this is what my life looks like now if I let you stay in it. Headlines. Strangers writing lies about my daughter's mother. I left everything behind once already to give her something stable. I can't... I'll walk away, Ji-hoon said suddenly. Grace blinked. What? If that's what protects you, if that's what protects her, I'll walk away tonight, and you'll never have to deal with another headline again. He said it plainly, without drama, the same way he'd once fired her. Flat, absolute, final. Except this time his hands were clenched on his knees, and this time his voice, for the first time since she'd known him, actually shook. I built an empire, Grace. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. And in 3 years, the only meal I could keep down was yours. And the only place I wanted to be at the end of a day was your kitchen table, watching your daughter argue. With a hamster's honour. I don't know how to say that without sounding insane, but I'd rather sound insane and be honest than let you walk away thinking this was ever about my image. The park was quiet except for the wind moving through the trees. You'd really walk away, Grace said slowly, just like that. If it's what you need, yes. She studied him for a long moment, long enough that he genuinely didn't know which answer was coming, and then, unexpectedly, she laughed, not unkindly, something closer to disbelief, tired and warm all at once. You are the strangest man I have ever met, she said. You fire me on a Tuesday, apologize on a Thursday, and now you're offering to disappear out of some noble billionaire sacrifice. No. Sit down. He hadn't moved. I said, sit. He sat. I don't want you to walk away, Grace said, quieter now. I want you to stop showing up, like you're waiting for permission to stay. Something shifted across his face. Relief, disbelief. Something that looked almost like the boy he must have been before an empire and a poisoning and 6 years of never once softening had rebuilt him into someone else entirely. Say it again, he said, slower. I want to remember exactly how it sounded. Don't push your luck, Kang. Too late, he said, and for the first time in the entire story, he smiled, really smiled, unguarded, the kind that made him look almost unbearably young. Your daughter already put it in her report. 2 months later, the correction ran exactly where Ji-hoon promised it would. Front page, full retraction, Yoon-hee's name attached to a defamation settlement large enough to end her career permanently. Kang Group's stock, against every analyst's prediction, actually rose. Turns out the public rather likes a CEO capable of admitting he was wrong. But none of that mattered nearly as much on a quiet Sunday evening as the sight of Ji-hoon Kang standing in Grace Johnson's small kitchen in his shirt sleeves, badly chopping green onions under Amara's ruthless supervision. You're doing it wrong, she informed him, arms crossed, wooden spoon in hand like a scepter. Smaller pieces. Mum always does it smaller. I am a graduate of one of the finest business schools in the country, Ji-hoon said, and I am being lectured on knife technique by a 7-year-old. I'm 7 3/4. My deepest apologies. Grace, leaning against the counter, watching the two of them bicker over onions with the particular fondness of a woman who'd stopped fighting the inevitable weeks ago, caught his eye across the kitchen and shook her head, smiling. Say it, Amara demanded, not looking up from her supervisory post. The thing you're supposed to say when you're wrong. Ji-hoon set down the knife, looked directly at her with the same gravity he gave board meetings and said, I'm sorry. You were right. Smaller pieces. Good, Amara said, satisfied, and went back to narrating her school day, as if nothing at all had happened. As if the most powerful man in Seoul hadn't just apologized, sincerely, for the 2nd time in his life, to a child who'd taught him how. Grace watched them both, her daughter and the man who'd fired her, and then rebuilt himself piece by piece to deserve a seat at this table, and thought, not for the first time, that some of the biggest lessons in life come from the smallest, fiercest voices, the ones brave enough to say what everyone else is too afraid to. Apologize to my mum. 4 words, 1 little girl, and an empire, quietly, permanently changed. Word had a way of travelling in Seoul, the way it does in any city where people are hungry for proof that power can still be humbled by something as simple as decency. And so, 6 months after a 7-year-old girl planted her feet in a marble lobby and refused to move, the story of Grace Johnson and Ji-hoon Kang had become something closer to local legend than gossip. Not because of the headlines. Those had faded, as headlines do, replaced eventually by other scandals, other CEOs, other viral moments competing for the same 15 seconds of outrage. What stayed, what people actually remembered, months later, telling the story to friends over dinner, was the ending nobody expected from a man like him. Kang Group launched a scholarship fund that spring. Quietly, without a press conference, without his name attached to the announcement at all, until a reporter dug it up anyway and ran the story regardless. It was called, simply, the Grace Fund, built to support single mothers working full-time while raising children alone, covering childcare costs, emergency housing, tuition. Ji-hoon had wanted no credit for it. Grace had insisted, when she found out, that he at least let it carry a name that meant something. "Not mine," she'd said, arms crossed in that familiar way. "Ours. All of us who've had to hold a whole life together with 2 hands, and no help." He'd agreed. It was, by then, becoming something of a pattern between them. Her softening his edges, him learning, slowly, that some of the best decisions in his life were the ones he didn't make alone anymore. Amara, for her part, had appointed herself the fund's unofficial spokesperson, a title nobody had given her, and nobody had the heart to take away. She informed her entire 2nd grade class, with great authority, that she was basically the reason it exists, which was, everyone privately agreed, not entirely inaccurate. If you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with this one. This story means a lot to me, and if it meant something to you too, let me know in the comments. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage doesn't need to be loud to change everything. Now, let's finish where it all began. The lobby of Kang Tower looked different on a Sunday afternoon. Quiet, sunlit, empty of the usual rush of suits and schedules. Grace stood near the same spot where she'd once collected her things from a locker with shaking hands, watching her daughter spin slowly in the middle of the marble floor, arms outstretched, giggling at the way her voice echoed off the high ceiling. "This is where it happened," Amara announced, to no one in particular, the way she announced most things, as fact, delivered with the confidence of someone who had never once doubted her own version of events. "Right here. I stood right here." "We remember," Grace said, laughing. Ji-hoon crossed the lobby toward them. Tie loosened, sleeves rolled, looking less like the man from the headlines every single day, and more like someone who simply belonged in this particular scene, beside this particular woman, trailing after this particular child who had, quite literally, changed the entire direction of his life with 4 words and 0 fear. "You're late," Amara informed him. "I had a meeting." "On a Sunday?" "With myself. About whether I deserve ice cream after making you wait." "You don't," Amara said, "but I'll let it go this once." "Generous of you." "I know." Grace shook her head, watching the 2 of them fall into their familiar rhythm. The bickering, the bantering, the easy affection that had, somewhere in the last several months, stopped feeling like an experiment and started feeling like simply how things were. She thought, sometimes, about that first terrible day, the folder, the humiliation, the walk of shame across this very floor with a chipped mug in her bag and her daughter's hand gripping hers. She thought about how close she'd come to leaving Seoul entirely, to giving up on a city that had, for one devastating afternoon, made her feel utterly disposable. And then she thought about the 4 words that had changed everything. "Apologize to my mum." Not a lawyer's argument, not a carefully worded complaint filed through proper channels. Just a child, unafraid, saying the truth exactly as she saw it, loud enough that the whole world had to stop and listen. "Hey!" Ji-hoon's voice quiet. Beside her now, Amara already 3 steps ahead, spinning toward the front doors. "Where'd you go?" "Just thinking," Grace said, "about how strange it is. That the worst day of my life turned into this." He looked at her for a long moment, something soft and certain settling into his expression. The look of a man who had once believed happiness was a variable he'd simply lost access to, and had slowly, carefully relearned otherwise. "I used to think I'd never eat a full meal again," he said. "Now I can't imagine a Sunday without both of you at my table." "Careful," Grace said, smiling. "That's dangerously close to sentimental for a man who fired me over a missing folder. I contain multitudes. You contain a 7-year-old's report card, is what you contain." 7 3/4, Amara called back over her shoulder, without even turning around, and both adults burst out laughing, the sound of it bouncing warm and easy off the same marble walls that had once carried nothing but silence and shame. Outside, the afternoon sun caught the glass of Kang Tower, turning it gold instead of cold. And somewhere in that light, a family that had never meant to become one walked out through the front doors together. An empire quietly rebuilt, not on power or fear, but on 4 words a little girl had never once been afraid to say. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why I make these. So don't scroll away just yet. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me your favourite moment, because I read every single one. There's another story just like this one waiting for you next, and I promise it's just as unforgettable. See you there.